Hello and welcome. As usual, we'll wait just a minute or two to let people join in on the Zoom if they're going to. I call this meeting of the South Whitby School Board to order. We will have all three types of meetings here tonight. We will have a board workshop, a business meeting, and an executive session. But first, I'm going to turn to Director Jackson for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. South Whitby School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral land of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish peoples, and the peoples collectively affiliated with the Tulalip tribes. Their longstanding ancestral ties to this place, their intergenerational stewardship of these lands and waters, their sacred ties to the people, the beings, the entities of this land, feed us and nurture us and teach us. And we acknowledge their past, present, and future stewardship of and deep ties to this place as fundamental to our collective well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unusually for a workshop, we're up here. Usually we're down there around tables with y'all. But we do want to keep the workshop portion open for comment. During the workshops, we relax Robert's rules and not only allow, but encourage public comment on the agenda items that we're currently discussing. If you're here in person and have something you'd like to say, just raise your hand, come on up to the mic, and we'll bring you into the discussion. If you're on Zoom, please use the Q&A function to enter your name and location, and that'll let us know that you have something to say, and we can pause, and then while you're typing up your comment, which I will then read. When we go into the business meeting, we go back into Robert's rules, which means that it is a meeting of the school board in public rather than a meeting of the school board with public, like the workshop is. There will be a time for public comment on any topic that folks would like to talk about. You will not generally get a response besides thanking you for making the comment from the board, because it is an opportunity for you to comment to us, not to engage in a discussion. And then at the end of this meeting, we will have an executive session lasting about 1 hour to discuss ongoing negotiations. We'll move straight into the workshop then, starting with we've got a bunch of policy review, policy discussion, and this is policy 1820 about evaluation of the board of directors. A lot of these policies are just going to be minor wording updates, but I believe this is one that we're actually going to look at and make sure that we are happy with. It has not been touched since March 7. Oh, sorry, yeah, March 7 of 2005. Yes, thank you, Andrea. Director Downs. Whew. We're all out of, or at least I'm out of practice.
I'm just gonna say I've been trying to come to a school board for like the last 2 weeks, and yeah, I couldn't figure out when I was supposed to come. So glad I'm here.
So this is pretty straightforward. I don't. Oh, this is the one that you were looking at update? No. I'm trying to remember why this one is on there. It doesn't have a specific wording change on there. Ms. McCart, do you remember what we had discussed about this one? Oh, just reviewing our own policy on evaluation of the board. Got it. Is there any update that folks would like to suggest on this?
Since I don't believe we had student representation with the school board when this was last reviewed in 2005, I wonder if our student representatives would like to offer any insight into the policy or opportunities to make it stronger.
Would it be possible to zoom in on that on the screen a little so that those in attendance can read a little easier? Thank you very much.
I don't know if it's allowed, but is it possible to add in with like advice from students into the policy? I don't know what the formal protocol is though, however.
I like that idea, and to put it into wording, I would suggest something to the effect of just making it really clear that when we say the board, we mean both voting and student members. So it's clear that everyone here on the dais has input into the board evaluation.
I would even suggest including board secretary and student representatives to make sure that we're including the superintendent as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it could even just be the board, comma, including board secretary and student representatives, comma, shall evaluate its own performance.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this?
The only other thing I can think of is, so we used the WASDA tool. That's the Washington State School Directors Association. They have a formal evaluation tool based on the state board competencies.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it would be too prescriptive to add that into here. But that's the only other thing I could think of that's like a gap between what we do and what this policy says we should do.
I have one suggestion. This actually refers to board retreat. And I think you're reviewing the policy on what kinds of board meetings you have, and you may want to think about adding retreat as one of the types of meetings that the board has.
Yeah, that's, I believe, coming up next month, adding that in. We could simplify this by saying before the beginning of each school year. Then it's not prescriptive as
Right.
to it being after a
you do it.
retreat. Yeah. And that means we have the entire summer to do it.
I like that suggestion. And to return to your suggestion, Director Greenhairn, it might be helpful to have language that says something about evaluating its own performance using an agreed upon tool or method in terms of generally accepted principles, just so that we have the flexibility to use a different agreed upon tool or method, but that we are having some kind of tool or method to do our self-evaluation.
Yeah, I like that.
Looking at this real quick. So what we've been discussing is changing at the end of the school year board retreat to before the beginning of each school year. The board, including the two other, shall evaluate its performance in terms of generally. So where do you want to add the language about tools?
I thought we might say the board shall evaluate, maybe the board shall evaluate its own performance. Maybe after objectives at the very end of that first sentence, just add using agreed upon tools or methods. And perhaps it's unnecessary, but it's a balance between what we have and what we would have if we pointed to WASDA's guidance on the subject.
Well, one thing it does do is it forces our hand to agree on tools and methods. That way we can't go into self-evaluation with competing tools and methods. So I like that about
That's
it.
true. Self-evaluation anarchy is hard.
Okay, so. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this down to make sure that we've got it written down.
An alternative, just in terms of keeping that first sentence from being too much of a run-on, would be to say the board's self-evaluation shall use agreed upon tools or methods and shall address performance and the key functions of school boards.
I like that. Okay. Got that written down. Just, I expect that Ms. Macaro is writing down also, but I just want to make sure we've got it two places so we've got it set. Any other comments or suggestions on this policy from the community?
Quick procedural question before we move on. When a workshop like this results in substantive changes to a policy, does it go directly to a business meeting to be approved, or do we do another reading?
It will go to a business meeting. This is the first reading.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We can move on from this one. Most of the rest of these are going to be very simple and straightforward. They're just most of them are just updating a few terms and language points. This one, however, Director Greenherron had a suggestion on 1005, which is key function of the board.
And do you want me to give some voiceover? Sure. So after the last board retreat, during the last board retreat, when we seemed to all be in agreement on how we liked the goal setting process, I suggested we put it into policy. So the idea behind this is it's short and sweet. It prevents us from needing to reinvent the wheel at every board retreat because it gives us some guidance on how to set goals. And then it also sets up future boards for best practices and high performing organizations. And then lastly, it compels us to focus at least one goal or key result if we use objectives and key results on student outcomes, since that's pretty important. And then Dr. Moshe added the middle sentence, Dr. Moshe suggested the middle sentence, which provides guidance on the types of goals that we should be creating for the district.
Joe, I want to say Director Greenherron, I want to say thank you for taking this on and adding those in. One piece that I would think that we could consider, which would not necessarily be our lane, but Dr. Moshe's lane, would be using the tool that we used and adding that as a procedure potentially to this policy so that the document that you've supported creating with Dr. Moshe can also continue to live on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So in that case, would a change be made to this to reference procedure?
No, it'd just be the procedure associated with the policy.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
I echo the thanks for putting this together. I do have one concern that we're recommending something to future boards with this rather than telling them what they shall or shall not do or may not do. We're saying, we think you should do this. And that doesn't feel like policy to me. That feels like best practices. And I don't know if that should be in policy or.
What do you mean by?
The goals may cover academic, social, emotional development, and logistics.
I think that leaves the door open, but I think it's also very clear that goal setting process will use current best practices. And at least one goal or key result annually will focus on student outcomes. So I think it's framed with very clear direction.
Yeah, I love the first and third sentence. I was just concerned about whether recommendations were the goal use of policy.
I would suggest we take out the word may. I mean, the goals should really be social, emotional, academic, and logistics. You've got three broad areas that every district should really focus on. So I'm not sure that you need the word may.
Yeah, my thinking, and perhaps I was overthinking it, was what if at some point in the future, logistics are perfect and we don't even want to goal that year on logistics? We would be compelled if we had should.
But your logistics could be to maintain, right? I just think it compels the board to not lose sight of those things.
Yeah, I'm
So
hap-
that
oh,
you're
sorry.
focused on each of the three major areas every year. It's just my opinion based on what experience I've had here. That would be my suggestion, is to take out may and
But
will
or shall.
address.
Yeah.
Okay.
Will
Yeah.
address academics.
That, yeah,
right.
because then that says that it'll cover these. It doesn't say that the goals will be these three
Right,
things. Yeah.
right.
Will address, I like.
Yeah, I like that.
If we wanted to direct future boards to have goals that cover these areas, but leave room for covering additional areas that we may not have included, we could say goals will address, but need not be limited to academics, social emotional development, and logistics. I mean, there may be a goal around decor or something that, we just haven't thought of yet.
That's logistics.
Logistics.
Is it? I suppose so. I don't know.
I think we'd be hard pressed to figure out a goal that you couldn't put under one of those three categories.
Fair enough.
Give me just a second. I'm going to look at some language in a different district policy and see if I
Excellent.
can find something. I mean, by all means, you guys can keep talking, but just don't move on from this topic.
Do the student representatives have any input on this one? Any ideas on how we can make it clearer or better, or things we need or don't need to do?
I agree with the taking out the may and making it more as a direct statement instead of a suggestion, just so in the future it can't be used as like, well, it was a maybe, so we don't need to use it.
Okay, I found it. Each year, the board, in cooperation with the superintendent, will review the district's priority student outcomes, strategic themes, objectives, and initiatives which are aligned with the district's mission, vision, and core values. Each school and site within the district shall undertake operational planning on a regular basis. Those plans will be aligned with the district's strategic plan and will prioritize the improvement of student success. We could use outcomes. At the conclusion of the school year, the superintendent shall submit a report to the board, which shall reflect the degree to which the district's priority student outcomes, strategic themes, objectives, and initiatives have been accomplished. Annual achievements and recognition of accomplishments will be reported to the community each year.
Effective 2025.
Effective 2025.
What district is that from?
That's from Everett, and they have a really robust strategic plan. The strategic plan that you really liked from Anacortes is Everett's template. So in thinking of what we liked about that, this would be a policy that would support that document.
That's a lot of very pretty words. Yeah,
I know the board is looking at strategic planning as it goes forward. Perhaps it becomes part of the policy at that point.
Yeah.
When you redevelop your,
my concern about that, your comment goes to a concern I had as well, which is our strategic plan is a little old at this point. But I liked the reference to with the assistance of the superintendent, or in cooperation with the superintendent, and I liked the in alignment with mission, vision, and goals. There was a bunch in there that I really liked.
I think if we take the language and instead of the middle sentence that we're proposing,
Mhm.
we could have it say the goal setting process will use current best practices and will prioritize student outcomes, strategic themes, objectives, and initiatives which are aligned with the district's mission, vision, and core values. That keeps it
Yeah.
centered on academics.
Well, but
And
our-
you could add in the line, you could say mission, vision, and core values, and will prioritize the improvement of student outcomes.
yeah, I like that. I do not have it written down prettily, but
And then close it off with at least one, I mean, that would replace the last two sentences.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that.
Director Downs, if you could send that wording to the board and Mrs. McCarrow, that would be fantastic. I mean, not right now, but
Ms. McCarrow, it's their policy 1810.
because, yeah, I like that very much. Okay, comments for the questions? Anything from the community?
Well, they also have a policy that they reference in this policy, which is the evaluation of the board. So if we wanted to also consider that one at some point, it might be a good one to look at.
Okay.
Theirs is also very short.
So we can take a look at that and see if there's anything we would like to suggest as an amendment at the business meeting when we look at that again. Okay, any other? Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is policy 1611, conflicts of interest. And this one is just removing his or her, he or she language and replacing it with gender neutral language. I just called out several of these to try to get through them all during my time on the board. Because I think it's important to make these policies as accessible and welcoming as possible. Comments, questions? Okay, let's move on to the next one, which this is actually a new one, policy 2230, transition to kindergarten program. Dr. Moshe, do you want to address this one?
Yes, thank you. Very excited that we were able to respond to the sudden closure of the ECAP program in June with opening our own transitional kindergarten, or as we call it, inclusive transitional kindergarten. And it coincided with the new ruling that allows us to actually capture the funding as we would for any other student enrolled in our district. So this policy was written by WASDA folks prior to the change in the name. And I'm sorry I didn't catch this before it was on the agenda. It's not transition to kindergarten, it's transitional kindergarten. It's TK as it's known. So we can change that, but essentially this provides the authority. And just point of information, I was going to talk about it under the superintendent's report, but we have 16 students enrolled in that program. All of the students who have special needs are in there, as well as typically developing students. We have a teacher, we have paraprofessionals and other support staff in there to work with that group. It is located down at the South Campus, right next to the kindergarten. I'm sorry, the playground that is for young children. So very excited about it. Had an open house for parents and children the other day. And it's just really good to see that we have put a program together that is as robust as this will be. So I encourage folks on the board to visit it once we get underway next week. Students actually begin full-time there on September 18th, but there will be parent meetings over the course of the next several school days. So anyway, this policy supports the district's ability to do that. There's no rush though. So, take your time to review it. Under the rules, a student must be at least 4 years old by August 31st of the school year. We did not establish any exceptions, but by law, a student can turn 5 in that program, but cannot turn 6. We've kept it with 4-year-olds at this point. We have a wait list already. So we do have the opportunity to screen. As a matter of fact, it's required. So, and my understanding is that Director Downs in her day job actually is now in charge of this program at the ESD level. So, which is nice for us to have that expertise, but we are fully compliant with this policy as it's written.
I also just want to say that it's no small feat that you were able to pull this off in the timeline that you did and to staff it the way that you did and to get the numbers that you did. And so hats off to you, Dr. Moshe, and your team, because that was a huge lift.
A lot of folks had a hand in it, and thank you for that. But all I did was move things out of the way so we could get this done.
Still a huge feat. +1. Thank you.
To all involved, thank you, and please pass our thanks along to them as well, because it's a huge need in this community, clearly, since there's a wait list after 3 months.
It's great to see that there's a program that's for all students and they have a chance to go to a traditional school and really have an education that they deserve.
It'll be exciting to see how our kindergarten teachers react next year when we have students coming in with those experiences, because it's hard to be a kindergarten teacher when students come in having never been in school. And by the way, these 4-year-olds go to school full day. There will be some rest time, but we are required to have the same number of hours as we would for any kindergarten student. So, yep. So thank you for letting me expand on that.
Yeah, well, +2 to the thank you for pulling it together so quickly. Since there's a wait list, is there the ability to expand the program to meet the demand?
At this point, we don't have enough for 2 classes. If we have anyone on the wait list who has an IEP, we can accommodate them in the program. We've left a little room. We have 16 students in there right now, and really don't want to go to 20 or 22 because it's way too many for 4-year-olds. But without another 15 or so, it's kind of cost prohibitive. So we're waiting right now to see how we do. Students may find the day too long and not stay with it. So we're steady as she goes.
Makes sense. Thank you.
It's good to know that there is the capacity if there is a large wait list to expand that, though. Anything on the policy itself? It's pretty straightforward to me, so. Okay. Move on to the next policy, which is 3123, withdrawal prior to graduation. This is another language one. Getting parent or guardian, getting his, her changed to their, and some shalls to wills. And yeah. Comments, questions? Okay. We'll move on to the next one, which is policy 3141, non-resident students. Similar one, this is just updating language. Policy 5409, unpaid holidays for reasons of faith or conscience. Again, just the language update. These are all existing policies that were here already that we're just updating language on. Any to add on this one?
The glance at the top, first paragraph, they determine rather than they determines.
Oh, he or she determines, they determine. Yes. Good catch. Okay. Policy 6215, voucher certification and approval. This is one that is an essential update from WASD, as I recall. Ms. Macaro, that's accurate? Yes. So we are not a first-class district, so that added paragraph does not apply to us.
Does the entire paragraph not apply, or just the part in the square brackets? Because there's one more sentence after that that we already do anyway, so I don't know if it matters.
It's the part in square brackets because that's just, that was previously at the end of the first paragraph. That sentence was. It's just been broken out.
Oh, okay. I see. And there's a dollar value that's stricken. Are we replacing that with a different amount, or just removing the dollar amount?
Dr. Mochi, do you have any insight on that question, the dollar amount there?
Dan might.
Oh, yes. I think we actually had a motion this past fall to expand the dollar amount that would fit in there. I think we have policy on that.
We have policy on contracts. This is
All right.
about
Yes, yes,
expenses
you're right.
for a vendor.
Yeah.
And I do recall 15,000, but let us get back to you on that.
Okay. thank
Sorry
you.
that we don't have that tonight.
That's okay.
Beyond that one, any comments or questions? Okay. Then we will move. That is the last one of our policy reviews for our workshop. So we will close this workshop and we will transition into a business meeting. And I now call this business meeting to order. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes are approved as presented. Are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved as presented, including the Southwood Elementary School field trip to Camp Kirby in April of 2024.
Covered by a grant.
Yes. We'll now move on to public comments. Has anyone signed up for public comment? Okay. I'll give it just a moment to, if there's anyone watching on Zoom who would like to make a public comment, please just enter your name and location in the Q&A function. And if, so that we know that you have a comment and we can wait for you to type it up. I'll give just a couple of moments for that. Okay, seeing nothing there, we'll move on from public comment to new business. We have two items of new business. The first is memorandum 2223-56, approval of the mother mentor lease at South Campus. Is there any discussion to be had on this?
Just a question, is this, is there anything significantly different from the prior lease or from other leases for similar tenants?
Yes and no. Yes, because they're occupying more space and paying for more space. But no, it's not substantially different.
I love that they have enough interest to expand and that we are able to accommodate that expansion. Anything else? Okay. Can I have some student advisory votes on this memorandum?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving memorandum 2223-56, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum has been approved. Moving on to memorandum 2223-57, approval of the recommended child nutrition paid meal pricing for 2023-2024. Mr. Pullman, you have some context to add for this.
Yeah, I should, before we talk about the recommendation, the reason why I would recommend this. Because we receive federal funds for reimbursement for free and reduced price meals, we are required by the Code of Federal Regulations to look at our paid price for meals and see how it relates to the federal reimbursement rate. And it's a process started in 2011. And basically, there's a calculation that comes out of OSBI each year, and it says this is the minimum amount you can charge as an average across your district for lunches. So we take the elementary and we take the secondary total number divided by the number, and we come up with a rate, which this year is $3.62. Based on the federal $4.33, the minimum that we could charge is $3.56. So we're a little bit below that. So we have two options. The first is, and my recommendation is, that we increase by 5 cents about every year. Otherwise, we're going to see jumps next year, probably 15 cents, because it's based upon 2% plus CPI adjustment. So if we add that, it's going to increase it by 12 cents next year. We're going to be below by, that amount. So you have two choices here. You can either do it about 5 cents a year, kind of consistently, or as we did last year, we didn't do it for 5 years because of COVID and we didn't have paid meals. We increased it by 25 cents. So you could wait to next year, increase it by 12 to 15 cents, or we can try 5 cents a year. It's really up to you, but it's a requirement that we have to do because of the free and reduced reimbursement we do receive. And it's audited by the auditors each year. They look at the spreadsheet and make sure you did your calculations correctly and all that type of stuff. So that's why I bring this forward. It's not going to generate a lot of money. It's about 30,000 meals at a nickel each is $1,500. So it's really about the federal requirement that we have to do that. And how do we do that? Do we do it gradually each year, or do we do it sporadically every few years at a higher rate?
Dan, along those lines, and looking up our program characteristics, our low income rate is at 36.9% right now. And if we are in elementary school at 40% free and reduced, then the whole school would actually qualify for free lunch for all students. That number of 36.9%, I mean, that's within a margin of has everybody filled out the paperwork who needs to fill out the paperwork? And my wonder is there an effort to really capture some families that maybe could benefit from that, where it could raise us up to that 40%?
So two things. It's currently 40% for the current 23-24 school year, dropping in 24-25 to 30%. We will qualify at that point. I think that 36% is artificially high because it incorporates last year's free and reduced, which will drop off in October. So if we look at our last year percentage, we're at about 31%. So we're still quite a ways away from that 40. I was very hopeful that we were going to get close to that for the current year. So yes, I think in a year from now, K4, not K5, but K4 will qualify for free meals. 512 will not. So we'll still have to do the calculation for 512 because it's all paid meals in the district, regardless of the free meals. So we will still have the same situation going on. The advantage is the secondary pays a little more already, so we could probably get another year out of it maybe without having to change anything. And that's assuming that our free and reduced population stays about the same in the coming year.
I'd be interested in what the students might have to say about this.
I think as a student, I'd rather a 5 cent increase over 3 years than a 15-cent increase in 1 year. So I feel like doing this gradually is definitely a better way to go than jumping another 15 cents because we already had 25 cents last year. So then if you have another 15, it's kind of a large jump from pre-COVID and during COVID. So I feel like making it a little less drastic is the better way to go.
Yeah, I was on the same line of thinking as that. I think we should go the longer route then.
I'm generally, in most cases, in agreement that slow and steady change is better. So thank you for the input.
Generally, I would agree with the slow and steady approach. My only question is, has anyone done the math to see if it would actually cost families more to pay 5 cents more per year rather than waiting a couple of years and then starting to pay 15 cents more? I'm guessing that the cost burden to families would be higher with the incremental change, but maybe I was an English major. So, so I guess I'm just wondering, psychologically, the gradual approach feels better, but mathematically, does the gradual approach shake out as comparable cost to families?
Depends on whether you're a junior or a senior. Now, if you are, yeah, let's wait. Otherwise, what we're really talking about though is you talk about 5 meals a week. So that's 25 cents a week, $1 a month for potentially 9 months. And it's just my personal opinion, but I think the gradual, it's a nickel a year versus wait and jump, because it's sometimes the political perspective of, and we saw that last year with the 25 cents, which if we didn't do that, we would have had to raise it a lot more this year in order to maintain this. I think that political piece of raising it a large amount every few years is a little harder.
Fair enough. May I just drop a related note in? I spent some time today with our representative, Clyde Shavers, and he said that this discussion of how to make sure that our students get fed is still on the is still a topic of conversation in the House Education Committee. So we can hope that one day we won't have to be having these conversations. Thank you.
That would be fantastic. Not just the financial aspect for our students and families, but also the social aspect. Just anyone being able to go up there and get lunch without paying takes a lot of stigma off not paying. That would be fantastic. Thank you for continuing that discussion. Any other comments or discussion on this item? Okay, student representatives, your advisory votes, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving memorandum 2223-57, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, the memorandum has been approved. That concludes our new business for tonight. We will move on to our reports. Mr. Pullman, the financial report.
This is our report as of July 31st. So it's our 11th month of our fiscal year. We're almost there, even though we're starting a new school year. It seems a little awkward, but it's the way we operate. So we're about 92% of the way through the year. About 95% of our revenue has been received year to date. And do remember that we actually received revenue in September for our federal grants that are part of the current school year. And our expenditures are at about 90%. And you can see that the revenue and expenditure are very close. The expenditures are a little bit higher, but not much. And if we look at the bottom part, you can see the revenue pattern, expecting a little less in August than we do in July, and it has to do with the pattern of when OSPI pays. We also have a expenditure drop in July that was less than normal. You will probably see one in August that's going to be higher than normal. So it's when we do our AP payments and when we receive our PSE bills and those type of things really affects that type of balance. But it's just very similar to previous years. This is the one I really like. And you can see that, in the previous years, our during COVID, our revenue exceeded our expenditures. Last year, expenditures were above revenue at this time more than it is today. We're almost balanced, and that's where you want to be in August or July, because as we move into August, it's a pretty similar revenue expenditure normally. So if we're about balanced here, we'll end up that way at the end of the year. So that's a good thing to see. Much better than we're looking at, expenditures exceeding revenue as we did for a while there in 17-18.
Just going back for a second, Mr. Pullman, that significant drop in expenditures, did that in large part have to do with the cost saving measures that were enacted, including the week of furlough that yourself and Dr. Moshe took? And
No, those
that's still
furloughs
coming?
are for the coming school year, starting in September. This was just less, basically accounts payable predominantly, because salaries and benefits are pretty consistent throughout the year. There are a couple months when we pay additional stipends, those type of things, but it's really the accounts payable that makes that fluctuation from month to month more than anything else.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Budget status report. You can see that we had budgeted to be at 21,230,000. We're at 20,201,000 and expecting about 1.8 million in revenue coming in, higher than our balance. And that had to do with enrollment being up and also an additional payment for enrollment stabilization and some federal dollars that were additional to the budget process. Out of the $22.5 million in expenditures, we're currently at 20.2 million with about 2 million encumbered. So we are still within our budget capacity. We'll not do a budget extension for the current year. So, everything's falling in line as far as the expenditures, and revenues were actually a little higher than we anticipated. So I don't think we're going to end up using a lot of fund balance for the current year. We're going to be pretty well balanced, I believe. And this is just looking at expenditures with encumbrances. You see that we're at 98.6% of budget. So we're not going to go over that 100%. This is the expenditures and just a bigger picture. But again, a few months ago, you'd asked about, do we change our fund balance policy from 6% to a different percent? Well, if we average it out for the month, it's about 1.8 million, or about 8.2% is what our average spending is on a monthly basis. So if we needed enough to cover an entire month, fund balance should have an 8.2% fund balance or an 8% as opposed to a 6%. So it's something to think about as a board.
Dan, if we were to adjust that and adjust our policy to maintaining an 8.2% fund balance, how would that impact your projections?
Well, first, our policy doesn't maintain a percent fund balance. Our policy states that we will budget in the budget process a whatever percent fund balance. So it really only affects the budgeting process. And, where do I have to get to that bottom line in order to have that type of fund balance at the end of the year? So that's the way it's currently written. It isn't that we maintain a fund balance over time, because at times that would be difficult, such as February, usually in a typical school district in a typical year. So anyways, that's what our fund balance policy talks about. It's really just budgeting a fund balance percentage. Again, just looking at revenue, expenditure, and how that is laid out as far as assets and liability, still comes with that $5.2 million fund balance at the end. Also gives you fund balances for capital projects, debt service, ASB, private purpose trust, and the transportation vehicle fund. Fund balance, just a projection through the year, and you can see how that has fluctuated, and we will end up most likely somewhere between the last year and the year before fund balance. I'm thinking about 5 million by the time we get to the end of the year is where our fund balance will be at the beginning of next year. Revenue, you can look at our revenue and kind of see what changes there are. Local property taxes doesn't change for us. We're on a per student amount. So even though the rate goes up slightly as student enrollment goes down, we continue to have that same amount. And the concern with that is that's where we pay for all the things that aren't funded by the state. And there's no revenue growth in there to offset those costs. It's good to see that the local revenue generated with the school and the community center is kind of back to normal or back to where we had been. The state general purpose is up a little from last year, but still below where we were 4 years ago. So it's that continued trend of very flat revenue. State special purpose, very similar. And the federal, though it's up this year, this is the last year of ESSER funds, so it'll drop back down to what you see in about 2021, a little under $1 million. And it's all categorical. It's for very specific purposes, special education, remedial education, et cetera. And then how do we spend our money? 3 on the left are salaries and benefits. It's certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, and then it's supply, service, and travel on the right side. And you can see, the changes in there. You can see the change in certificated staff. That's because in the budget process, we made reductions there. In 22-23, we didn't make reductions in classified salaries. And you can see that they went up slightly, and then benefits continue to rise, though we will see a reduction next year because retirement rates are going down. So that's a big benefit as a district.
And the large rise in, or the relatively large rise in services is because of increased insurance primarily?
Insurance,
Yeah.
utilities, curriculum purchases,
Yep.
things that are abnormal to our typical spending pattern is a lot of the service part of things. And to be honest, we have spent $75,000 on septic dumping fees over the summer because of failure with a system in the district here. So there's, those type things that can artificially inflate services because it isn't it's $2 million.
Yeah.
And if you spend an extra 100,000 on something, it has an effect that you wouldn't see in there. So, but yeah, it's those things. Services are things we don't have a lot of control over. It's the cost of consultants, legal fees, utilities, insurance, fuel, all the things that we are buying from other organizations. And so. The other funds, capital project has about $2 million currently in that account. And that again is used for repairs to the facility and for technology. Debt service has about $1,500. There's no payments due for the remainder of this year. The ASB has almost $70,000 in there, and we'll probably see a jump in August as kids come back and start paying fees for athletics and stuff. Transportation Vehicle Fund has about $152,000. You'll see a jump next month. We did receive the almost $400,000 from the federal government for the electric school bus. So we have the money. We're just waiting for the bus to show up. We will also receive a payment from the state for the other buses we have as a reimbursement. So that'll jump up. And then Private Purpose Trust has about $805,000 in there. So it's used for student scholarships donated from the community members, very substantial amount of money. The one thing with inflation that has been good this year is that we're seeing a lot more interest. And in accounts like Private Purpose Trust that has a big balance, we only spend the interest. So it's going to be providing more money for scholarships next year. So that's a big benefit.
Excellent.
Any questions I could answer for you?
Not entirely related to this, but tangentially, since you mentioned the electric school bus, all the infrastructure for that is in and you're all set with that to use it as soon as it gets here?
No,
No.
we're still waiting on the charging station.
Mhm.
It's from the manufacturer of the school bus and it's going to come up probably about the same time.
Okay.
So yeah, it shouldn't be hard to hook up. It's a single, 220 volt circuit, which we already have the electricity in that part of the building. So it'll be a pretty simple connection.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because I'm anxious, almost as anxious as the students and I'm sure the bus drivers
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah, I'm hoping it arrives in October, but hard to say with production of new items like that.
So I have 2 questions. The
Yeah.
first one is, what route will the electric bus be?
We haven't decided that yet.
Okay.
We will evaluate each of the routes and see which one would be most effective. It does have it's not an unlimited mileage. I think any of our routes could probably do it, though some are more hilly than others. There's places where we have used a hybrid before that had struggles of maintaining it. We probably won't take it off island to start with because the recharging capacity in a lot of school districts are not there yet. So it will be predominantly, one of our routes, but we will determine that the start of the school year when we get back. So I have no idea. We might even rotate it so that everybody gets an opportunity at some point to
Okay.
ride an electric school bus.
My second question is looking back at just kind of budget projections as we go forward. We've eliminated a couple positions at central office and reallocated those roles into both you and Dr. Moshe. So Dr. Moshe absorbing the special education director role, you absorbing maintenance, transportation, one other, HR. Do you know what the total cost savings of those, just in a ballpark off your head, of how much that's going to put back towards student focused funding?
Couple $100,000.
I'm thinking just with benefits, right?
Mhm.
Special services alone would be what, 200,000?
Well, it was a halftime position because
Okay.
it was also a halftime principal. Yeah, it would have been over 200,000 just for that one position had it been the whole 1.0.
Yeah,
And then we are backfilling, the maintenance with a 0.5. So that will probably save us another 75,000, from that part of it.
okay.
So probably closer to a couple $100,000, because part of it was a principal, right?
Yeah,
So there's
yeah.
that, yeah.
So just in ballparking that, that's almost $250,000 there,
You could get close to that by the time you look at all the benefits and combine them,
Yeah.
yeah.
plus the furlough time.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. We are applying for a second electric school bus. Don't know if it will be awarded, but we're doing it through a consortium with RWC, the bus company, and they're doing multiple districts because this round requires you to request 15 buses. And yeah, small districts aren't going to request 15 buses, but as a consortium, they can request 15 on our behalf, and then we can spread them out among 15 different districts or 10 or whatever number. So at some point, if we get that information, I may be coming back with you talking about getting another electric school bus.
Excellent. Then we won't have quite so many jealous bus drivers.
Jealous bus riders too.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions on the budget report? Thank you very much, Mr. Pullman. We will move on from there to our superintendent's report. This would normally be where we have a student report, but y'all are just getting ready for school. Anything you want to add?
Sports are in full swing, and so is ASB.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity. It has been an exciting and busy summer. So I've got some thank yous. Our custodial staff did an amazing job with little direction because of our situation with director of maintenance and custodial staff leaving in April. So I want to give them a big shout out for getting the work done. Shout out to Ian Turner, who was our interim director of maintenance. He will be going back full-time to technology Friday. To food service folks, the meals today for our in-service were outstanding. They did a great job. And of course, our maintenance folks worked shorthanded this summer, and we're in the process of hiring a third person. We did also see a few resignations, so principals worked hard to get positions filled and ready to go next week. So again, people worked hours to get ready. I want to thank Christy for talking our staff through public records today, something that could have been difficult. She did a beautiful job with. And our risk management folks came in and talked about how to prevent boundary invasions. And again, they did a good job and kept staff interested. And this afternoon, we did a session on inspiring hope. And that was Aaron Gutzmer and Mandy Jones talked about students and hope, and finished with how to help students de-escalate. So again, it was for all of the information we had to share, it was really a very positive day. And I think people were really happy about hearing from their colleagues. And as you heard, new role for the superintendent to be superintendent and director of special ed. And I'm going to get a two-sided hat. So the director of special ed can tell the superintendent what to do for supports and services, right? And yes, Dan is taken on also, he's directing maintenance right now and HR and doing a whole lot more. And yes, thank you for acknowledging that we also took a week's furlough. So it's really the combination of the two, but we've got a really good and dedicated staff. So it's, I think it's doable, but we'll see. So again, we're ready to go. And tomorrow is a teacher directed day for the most part. There's a staff meeting at each building, but teachers are getting ready and we're in full swing come Tuesday.
Speaking of what the maintenance workers are doing, I saw the solar panels go up on the roof here, right over our head now. That's exciting. Yeah. Thank you very much for the report. Anything else for board comments or reports? Anything anyone wants to share?
I'd like to share something. This is the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Protection Act, and there is a student writing contest being hosted by endangered.org. And if students and families and educators wish to learn more about this opportunity to participate, they can visit endangered.org and scroll down to the blog. It's an essay project open for grades 3 through 12, and there are some incentives for educators who want to get a whole classroom involved in submitting writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I just want to thank Dr. Moshe and the leadership team for getting everybody ready for the school year, given all the changes, the building reconfiguration, new bell times, new office, our new head office. It sounds like things are running really smoothly and you're setting up our students for a great start to the school year. So thank you.
I actually do have a comment too. As a board member who had a child attend kinder camp, he had a fantastic time and was very excited to wear his glasses and to do all of the kindergarten things. And he had a wonderful time and it was very well put together. I quickly dropped him off and ran away before he saw me cry, but I had no hesitation that he would be safe when I left.
Thank you. Yes. Anything else? Okay. This meeting will go into recess for our executive session. The executive session to discuss ongoing negotiations will take approximately 1 hour, and no action will be taken at or after the executive session. We will be closing the Zoom stream, so it will not be sitting here blank for 1 hour, but at the end of the executive session, I will formally close the meeting, formally adjourn the meeting. So we are now in recess. Thank you very much. Have a good night.